She said yes to a man she had never spoken to before that morning. Not because she wanted to, because the bank was taking the ranch in 30 days, and her youngest sister was 7 years old, and someone had to do something, and Evelyn Hart had spent her entire life being the someone who did something. Caleb Whitmore sat across the table from her with his hat in his hands and said, "I need a wife. You need money. We don't have to pretend it's anything else." She said yes, and then she looked at his hands, and she saw something that changed the entire calculation. If that stopped you, subscribe right now, hit the bell, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to Montana 1878 and find out what happens when two people who swore they didn't want love accidentally built exactly that. The morning Evelyn Hart agreed to marry a stranger, she had been awake since 3, not because she was nervous though she was, but because the youngest May had cried out in her sleep again, and Evelyn had gone to her in the dark, and sat on the edge of her narrow bed, and held her until the nightmare passed the way she had been doing since their mother died 2 years ago. And then she had gone back to her own room, and sat on the edge of her own bed, and looked at the wall until the sky started going gray. She was 25 years old. She had been managing the Hart Ranch, raising 3 younger siblings, and managing the specific daily mathematics of a life that had too many needs and not enough resources for 2 years. She had done it because there was nobody else to do it, and because their father had died the year before their mother, and the ranch was the only thing they had left, and she had promised both of them separately, in the months they each lay dying, that she would keep it. She was about to break that promise. Not because she hadn't tried. She had tried with everything she had. She had cut costs and sold what could be sold and negotiated with the bank twice and written letters to people she barely knew asking for the kind of help she hated asking for. She had planted more and slept less and worked until her hands had the quality of her father's hands, the useful, worn, permanently dirty hands of someone who was doing real work in real soil. None of it had been enough. 30 days. The bank had given her 30 days, and that conversation had been 3 weeks ago, and she had 7 days left, and no solution in sight when Caleb Whitmore's man rode out to the Hart Ranch with a letter. She had read it standing in the yard, still in her work clothes, her hair coming loose from its pin. The letter was brief. It said that Caleb Whitmore understood she was facing difficulties with the ranch. It said he had a proposal that might benefit both of them. It asked if she would meet with him at the Whitmore Ranch the following morning at 9. It was signed simply C. Whitmore. She had stood in the yard and held the letter. She knew who Caleb Whitmore was. Everyone in the valley knew who Caleb Whitmore was. He owned the largest ranch in 3 counties, 1,200 acres of Montana land, 100 head of cattle. A reputation for cold efficiency that made other ranchers both respect him and keep a careful distance. People said he was hard. People said he was fair, but not warm, which in Montana in 1878 was almost the same thing as being considered a good man, while also being considered someone you did not want to cross. He had never married. He had never, as far as anyone knew, been close to marrying. And he was writing her a letter about a proposal. She had gone inside and read it again. And then she had gone to find her brother Thomas, who was 18, and the only other adult-sized person in the household, and who she told things to because not telling him would mean managing the whole thing alone, which she had been doing for 2 years and was tired of. Thomas read the letter. "You're going to go," he said. "I don't know that," she said. "Yes, you do," he said. "You're going to go because you can't not go, because it might be the thing, and if you don't go, and it was the thing, and we lose the ranch." He stopped. He was 18 and trying to be logical, and the logic kept running into the feeling underneath it. "You're going to go." She had gone. The Whitmore Ranch was 40 minutes by wagon, and she arrived at 9:05, having been awake since 3 and wearing her second-best dress, which was not in excellent condition, but was considerably better than her work clothes, and was the best she could do. A man named Cord, one of Whitmore's senior hands she gathered from how the others moved around him, met her at the door and brought her to a study that smelled like wood and old paper and horses, which told her the man who used it spent more time outside than in it. Caleb Whitmore was standing when she came in. He was taller than she'd expected. She had seen him from a distance before at cattle sales and the occasional town event, but distance and a room were different. He was lean in the working way. His face was the face of someone who had spent most of their life outside, weathered at the edges. The kind of face that held its expression carefully because it was used to having that expression read. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. She sat. He sat. He looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them spoke for a moment that was not comfortable and not hostile, and was something in between that she didn't have a word for. Then he said, "I'll be direct." "Please," she said. "I need to marry," he said. "Not because I want to, because my father's will has a clause in it that requires me to be married before my 35th birthday, or the ranch goes into a trust administered by my father's former business partner." He held her gaze. "My birthday is in 4 months." She absorbed that. "Who is the business partner?" "Victor Langford," he said. "He." She knew that name, too. Victor Langford was the kind of man who was known across the territory, not for what he'd built, but for what he'd acquired, the specific category of wealthy men who had grown wealthy by identifying weakness in other people's positions and occupying it. She had heard her father say the name once years ago, with the specific tone he used for things he considered genuinely dangerous. "I see," she said. "I have been looking for a wife for 6 months," Caleb said. "On my own terms and discreetly. I have not found one." He was quiet for a moment. "I heard about your situation with the bank." She kept her face composed. It was a skill she had. She was very good at keeping her face composed. "People talk in this valley," she said. "They do," he said. "I don't say it to put you at a disadvantage. I say it because I want to be honest about why I'm here." He held her gaze. "You need money to save your ranch. I need a wife by my birthday. Those are the facts." "And the arrangement," she said. "Marriage," he said. "Legal and proper. You would live here. Your siblings would be provided for food, education, whatever they need. The Hart Ranch would be purchased at fair market value, which clears the bank debt and gives you resources. And," he paused, "you could continue to manage the Hart property as a working satellite of this ranch if you wanted. Keep it in operation under the Whitmore name." She looked at him. "What would you want from me?" she said, directly, because she was tired of indirect things. He held her gaze. "Management of this household," he said, "which is currently not managed because I have not had time to manage it, and I do not have the inclination. Help with certain social obligations that a single man cannot easily perform. A legitimate marriage that satisfies the terms of my father's will." He paused. "And your discretion about certain matters. There are things about this ranch and how I run it that I keep private. I would ask you to respect that." "What kind of things?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Things that are not dangerous to you or your family," he said. "Things that I will explain in time, but not today." She looked at him. This was the moment. She could feel at the hinge of it the specific weight of a decision that would be one kind of life or another kind of life, depending on what happened in the next few seconds. She had made a list at 3 a.m, sitting on the edge of her bed while May's nightmare ran its course. 2 columns. On one side, the reasons to consider it. On the other side, the reasons not to. The reasons not to column had been longer. But at the bottom of the reasons to column, she had written one thing that she had then stared at for a long time. May is 7. She looked at Caleb Whitmore. "I want to be direct as well," she said. "Go ahead," he said. "I'm not looking for a romantic arrangement," she said. "I have 3 siblings who need me and a ranch that needs saving, and I have been managing both for 2 years without stopping. I am not in a position to—" She paused. "I am not going to be what you want if what you want is someone warm and agreeable who makes your house pleasant." He held her gaze. Something in his expression shifted, not quite surprise, but the specific adjustment of a man whose expectations have just been recalibrated. "That's not what I want," he said. "Then what do you want?" she said. "I told you," he said. "Tell me again," she said, with less legal language. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something she had not expected. "Someone honest," he said. "Everything else can be managed, but I am tired of people who say what they think I want to hear and do what is convenient and call it loyalty." He looked at the desk for a moment, then at her. "You just told me you won't be warm and agreeable. That is more useful to me than most conversations I have had in the past 6 months." She looked at him. She looked at his hands, which were on the desk in front of him, and there it was, the thing she had registered from the doorway and not been able to name until now. His hands were the hands of someone who worked, not the hands of a man who directed other people's work from a distance. Calloused, marked the hands of someone who picked up the fence post and set it himself, rather than standing back and watching it done. She had expected the hands of a wealthy man. These were not those hands. "All right," she said. He looked at her. "All right. I'll marry you," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "You've decided." "You were honest with me," she said. "I respect that." She held his gaze. "I expect the same in return. When you say there are things you keep private and you will explain in time, I need to know that in time is real, not a convenient postponement." "It's real," he said. "Then all right," she said. He nodded once. He picked up a pen and pulled a document from his desk drawer and said, "Aldridge drew this up, the legal terms of the arrangement." He put it in front of her. She read it, all of it, every line. He waited while she read, and did not rush her, and did not offer explanations she hadn't asked for, which she noted because it was the opposite of how most men waited while a woman read something. She had 2 questions. She asked them. He answered both directly. She signed. He signed. They looked at each other across the desk. "The wedding," she said. "Next week," he said. "The circuit preacher is in town through Thursday. Simple ceremony. I don't want a spectacle." "Neither do I," she said. "Good," he said. She stood up. He stood up. They were both standing now, and there was the specific brief awkwardness of a transaction that was also something more than a transaction, and neither of them had a social framework for what the transition looked like. She extended her hand. He looked at it for a half-second, the half-second of a man recalibrating again, and then he shook it. His handshake was the handshake of someone who meant it. She noted that too. She went home and told Thomas. Thomas sat at the kitchen table and listened and was quiet for a long time. "Is it going to be all right?" he said finally. She thought about the hands and the honesty and the way he had waited while she read. "I don't know," she said. "But it's going to be real. And real is better than the alternative." Thomas looked at her. "What's the alternative?" "Losing the ranch," she said. "And May crying at night in a house that isn't ours anymore." Thomas looked at the table. "Okay," he said. She went to tell the younger ones. Her sister Nora was 12 and looked at her with the specific expression of a 12-year-old who understood more than she was supposed to and was deciding whether to say so. She didn't say so. She just nodded in the small, controlled way of a child who has learned to keep her fear on the inside. May was 7 and asked, "Will we still have the horses?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "And Nora and Thomas?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "Everyone comes." "Okay," May said, and went back to what she had been doing, which was drawing horses on a piece of paper in the way of a 7-year-old who has learned that if the important things are safe, the rest can be navigated. Evelyn watched her draw for a moment. She thought, "I would do this 10 times over for this." She went to pack. The wedding was on a Wednesday. Simple as promised. The circuit preacher and Cord and one other Whitmore hand as witnesses, and Thomas standing beside Evelyn with his jaw set in the specific way of an 18-year-old trying to look steady. She wore her best dress, which was not the second-best dress she'd worn to the meeting. She had one dress that had been her mother's, that she had kept folded carefully in the bottom of the trunk for occasions that required something better than what she owned. She wore it. Caleb across from her looked at her in that dress with an expression she caught and then lost immediately, something that crossed his face and was gone so fast she couldn't name it. Not desire, not quite. Something more startled than that. Something that looked like a man seeing something he hadn't expected. The preacher said the words. Caleb said yes. She said yes. It was done. Afterward, standing in the small sitting room that Cord had arranged with some attempt at celebration, there was food, simple food. The kind of food Cord clearly felt was appropriate for the occasion. Caleb stood beside her, and they looked at the room together. "Thomas seems like a good man," Caleb said quietly. "He's trying to be," she said. "He's only 18. "Some men are better at 18 than they are at 40, Caleb said. She looked at him sideways. "Are you speaking generally?" "No," he said. She looked back at the room. "The private matters," she said, equally quiet. "The things you said you would explain in time." "Yes," he said. "I'm not going to ask tonight," she said. "I told myself I would give you a fair amount of time before I started asking things." She paused. "But I want you to know I haven't forgotten." He looked at her sideways. "I didn't expect you would." "Good," she said. They stood beside each other in the small sitting room of the Whitmore Ranch, which was now also her ranch legally, and ate the food that Cord had arranged, and listened to Thomas trying to make conversation with the ranch hands, and watched May eating 3 pieces of cornbread with the focused determination of a 7-year-old who has found something worth prioritizing. It was not a romantic wedding. It was not supposed to be. But something had happened in the preacher's words that she had not prepared for, something in the specific weight of the commitment, the actual saying of yes in front of witnesses, and she was aware of it in her chest, in the specific way that you were aware of things you had told yourself you weren't going to feel and then felt anyway. She did not examine it. She went back to eating. That evening, Caleb showed her the main house fully, the rooms, the kitchen, the practical geography of a large house that had been managed by a housekeeper who had retired the previous year and had not been replaced. The disorganization was not severe, but it was real. The kind that accumulated when someone capable of managing things simply stopped. She walked through each room. He walked beside her. She said nothing about the state of it. He said, "I know it needs work." "Yes," she said. "I'll start in the kitchen." He looked at her. "You don't have to do it all at once." "I know," she said. "I'll start in the kitchen, because that's what the household needs first. The other things can be ordered." He held her gaze. "You organize by priority," he said. "Don't you?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "I didn't expect—" He stopped. "What?" she said. "That you would—" he said. "The same way." She looked at him. "What did you expect?" she said. He seemed to consider whether to answer. Then, "Someone who would be overwhelmed," he said. "Or someone who would immediately start asking me to change everything. Or someone who would be—" he paused. "Decorative." "Decorative," she said. "That is not a word I mean as an insult," he said carefully. "I know," she said. "It's a word you mean as an expectation that I'm not meeting." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. She looked at the kitchen, at the disorganized pantry, and the tools that needed attention, and the shelf of accounts that had clearly been touched by someone who understood numbers but had less time than the numbers required. "Caleb," she said. "Yes," he said. "I married you to save my family's ranch," she said. "You married me to save yours." She held his gaze. "We are both people who do what needs doing. I suspect that is why this arrangement made sense to both of us when other arrangements hadn't." She paused. "I don't think we need to pretend we're strangers who happen to end up in the same house. We both made a choice. We can work from there." He looked at her for a long time. "That's a practical position," he said. "I'm a practical person," she said. "I know," he said. "That's—" He stopped again. "What?" she said. "That's why I wrote the letter," he said. She looked at him. He held her gaze, and in it was something she hadn't seen in the meeting or the wedding or any of the careful day they had been managing together. Something that was not managed. Something that was for one brief moment simply there. Then he put his hat on the hook by the back door and said, "I'll be back late tonight. Don't wait up." She watched him go out. She heard the horse. She stood in the kitchen of the Whitmore Ranch, her ranch now legally, and listened to the hoofbeats fade in the direction of the mountains. She had been married for 6 hours. Her husband had just ridden away into the Montana dark without explanation. She turned back to the kitchen. She started in the pantry, because starting was what she did. Because doing the next necessary thing was how she had survived 2 years of loss and debt and 3 children who needed her and a ranch that needed more than she had. Because the pantry needed organizing and the house needed managing and the accounts on the shelf looked like they needed attention and there was work to be done. And because somewhere in the dark mountains to the north, her husband was riding toward a secret he had promised to explain in time. And Evelyn Hart. Evelyn Whitmore now. Which was still strange, which would be strange for a while, had learned in 25 years of doing what needed doing that the things people kept to themselves in the dark were usually either terrible or sacred. She had looked at his hands. She had a feeling she knew which. She organized the pantry until midnight. She went to bed. She lay in the dark of a room that was hers, in a house that was hers, in a marriage that was an arrangement between 2 strangers who had shaken hands on it like a business deal. She thought about his hands. She thought about the way he had said, "That's why I wrote the letter." She thought about the look on his face when he'd said it, the 1 second of something unmanaged. She thought, "I married a stranger, and I do not know what he is carrying, and he rode into the mountains at dusk on his wedding day, and this is my life now." And then because she was 25 years old and had been running on 3 hours of sleep and the accumulated weight of 2 years of holding everything together alone, she fell asleep. And in the morning when she woke, the coffee was already made. She came into the kitchen and found it there, hot, properly made, sitting on the stove like it had been timed. She looked at it. She looked at the back door, which was closed. She poured a cup. She sat at the table. And she understood from the coffee that had been made before she woke by a man who had come home late from the mountains and been up before her anyway, that Caleb Whitmore was a person who did what needed doing. Same as her. That was the most dangerous thing she had learned all morning. She drank her coffee. She went back to work, and for the first 2 weeks of her marriage, that was the sum of what Evelyn understood about her life at Whitmore Ranch. There was work, and there was Caleb, and the 2 things existed in parallel, without fully intersecting. The work, she understood. The house had been running on the momentum of its previous management, and that momentum was running out. The kitchen was first as she'd planned. She reorganized it over the course of 2 days, established a system for the pantry that would be legible to anyone, rather than just herself, and found 3 places where money was being spent on supplies that were either unnecessary or available at a better price from a different supplier. She made a note of all 3 and said nothing about them yet. The household accounts were next. She had asked for access directly without apology on the 3rd morning, and Caleb had produced the ledger without comment and set it in front of her and gone back to whatever he was doing. She had spent 2 evenings with the ledger and found what she'd suspected from the shelf's appearance. The accounts were accurate but not optimized. A man who had been managing 1,200 acres alone had not had time to manage the household with the same precision he brought to the cattle. She corrected 3 months of inefficiency in 4 hours. She told him at supper. He listened to what she'd found and what she'd changed and said, "That's a significant difference." "Over a year it compounds," she said. "I can show you the projection." "I'll take your word for it," he said. She looked at him. "You're not going to check my numbers." "Should I?" he said. "Most men would," she said. "I'm not most men," he said. He said it without arrogance, as a simple statement of fact. She held his gaze for a moment. "No," she said. "You're not." They ate supper. This was the texture of the first week's meals that were quieter than Evelyn was accustomed to, but not uncomfortably so. Work that was abundant and satisfying in the specific way of work that needed doing and was being done, and the daily discovery of small things about Caleb Whitmore that didn't match the man people described when they used his name. The first thing she noticed was how he was with the hands. She had expected from the reputation from the cold and distant stories, a man who issued orders from a distance and maintained the hierarchy of the ranch with the specific authority of someone who understood that distance was part of what made authority work. She had worked with and around men like that her whole life. She knew how they moved through a space. Caleb did not move through a space like that. He worked beside the hands. Not performatively, not in the way of a wealthy man who occasionally picked up a fence post to demonstrate his common touch. He worked because the work was there, and working was how things got done, and he appeared to have no interest in the version of himself that supervised from a comfortable distance. She saw it first on the fourth morning, when she came out of the house to find him on the south fence line, with two of the hands doing the kind of work that required being down in the mud with the post and the tools. He was not directing. He was doing. She watched for a moment. He looked up and saw her watching. He didn't wave. He didn't explain. He just looked at her with that steady expression, and then went back to the fence post. She went back inside and thought about his hands. She had been right about his hands. The second thing was Cord. Cord was the senior hand, 60-something, with the face of someone who had been outdoors for 60 years and had strong opinions about most things, but kept most of them to himself. He had been with the Whitmore Ranch since before Caleb took over from his father. He was the kind of man who didn't talk much, but whose opinion, when he expressed it, was clearly the one that counted. On the sixth day, Evelyn found herself working in the kitchen garden. She had started reclaiming the kitchen garden on day 4, because a working household ranch should have a kitchen garden, and the one here had been neglected when Cord came to get water from the outside pump. He looked at what she was doing. "You know kitchen gardens," he said. It was not quite a compliment. It was an observation. "My mother's," she said. "I kept it after she died." Cord looked at the rows she'd begun. "Caleb's mother had one," he said. "Right there, same spot." She looked at the ground. "I didn't know that," she said. "No reason you would," Cord said. He filled his water bucket. "She was good people, Mrs. Whitmore. The first one." He paused. "Things were different when she was here." Evelyn looked at him. "Different how?" Cord looked at the bucket. "The ranch had a different feeling to it," he said. "A house feeling, not just a working operation." He picked up the bucket. "Caleb was 16 when she died. His father was a different kind of man." He said it in the specific tone of someone choosing the minimum words to convey maximum information. "I've heard things about his father," Evelyn said carefully. "Most of what people say is true," Cord said. He walked back toward the barn, stopped, turned. "He's not his father." He said it simply, and then he walked away. Evelyn stood in the kitchen garden and held that for a while. He's not his father. She thought about the conversation in the study, about the will and the business partner, and the fact that Caleb had spent 6 months looking for a wife he hadn't found. She thought about a man who had grown up watching his father do things that had consequences that were still rippling through the valley, and who had inherited both the property and the weight of those things. She thought about the mountains. She went back to the garden. Thomas found his footing in the second week. She had been watching him carefully, the way a 25-year-old who has been acting as a parent watches a younger person in a new situation, looking for the signs of adjustment or struggle. Thomas had been quiet since the move, which was not like him. He was 18 and had his father's sociability and his mother's stubbornness, and he was usually not quiet. He was quiet because he was figuring out his position. She understood that. She was doing the same thing, but she had tasks that gave her position automatic shape. Thomas had been the man of the Hart household for 2 years in the specific, unofficial way of the eldest male child, in a household where the official authority has died and someone has to grow into the space. Coming to a ranch where there was an actual man and actual authority and 12 actual ranch hands meant finding out what his position was in that new structure. Caleb figured it out before Evelyn did. She saw it happen on a Thursday morning. Thomas was watching two of the hands work a young horse, not quite training, more like the early establishment of a working relationship between an animal and a person, with the specific expression of someone who wanted to be involved and didn't know if he was permitted to be. Caleb came out of the barn and assessed the situation in about 4 seconds. He said to Thomas, "Have you worked young horses before?" Thomas looked at him. "Some," he said. "Careful, not overselling." "Good," Caleb said. "Go stand at the near left. Don't move until I tell you to. You're going to be part of the boundary." Thomas went and stood at the near left. He was there for 20 minutes. Part of the process, part of the work, following instructions without being condescended to and being treated as someone whose presence was useful rather than someone who was being managed. Afterward, when the horse had been worked and the hands had moved on, Thomas came to find Evelyn in the kitchen with the specific expression of someone who has been given something they were hungry for without knowing they were hungry for it. "He just told me to stand there," Thomas said, "like it was obvious I should be there." "Yes," Evelyn said. "Why?" Thomas said. "He doesn't know me." She thought about it. "He saw someone who wanted to be useful," she said. "And he made room." Thomas thought about that. "He does that," he said. "I've been watching. He does that with all the hands. He just makes room." She looked at her brother. "Yes," she said. "He does." She filed that in the same place she'd filed the coffee and the fence post and Cord's 2 sentences. The third week brought the first real crack in the arrangement. Not a fight. Nothing that loud. Quieter than a fight, and in some ways more significant. She was in the study, going over the accounts Caleb had given her full access by the end of the first week, without being asked, which she also noted when she found something she didn't understand. A series of withdrawals. Regular, significant, not attached to any of the ranch's operational accounts she had been given access to. They went back 3 years. They were not enormous, not the kind of number that would destabilize a ranch of this size, but they were consistent and they were unexplained. She sat with them for a long time. She thought about the mountains. She thought about in time. She closed the ledger. She went to find Caleb. He was in the barn with a horse that had come up lame that morning, not working the horse, just sitting with it in the specific quiet way of someone who understood that sometimes presence was what was needed rather than action. She stood at the barn door. He looked up. "The accounts," she said. He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "There are withdrawals that don't attach to anything in the operational records you gave me," she said. "Regular, 3 years. I need to understand them to manage the accounts properly." He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "Is this the private matters you mentioned?" she said. "Part of it," he said. "You said in time," she said. "I said I wasn't going to push. I'm not pushing. I'm telling you that I found something I can't work around without understanding it, and I need you to know that." He looked at her for a long time. She held his gaze and did not fill the silence. "Give me 2 more weeks," he said. "All right," she said. "That's all you're going to say," he said. "All right." "You said in time," she said. "You haven't broken your word yet. 2 weeks is still in time." She held his gaze. "But Caleb, I want you to understand something." "Tell me," he said. "I agreed to discretion about private matters," she said. "I meant that. I'm not asking you to tell me everything tonight." She paused. "But I am going to find out eventually. I find things out. It's how I'm built." She held his gaze steadily. "I'd rather find out from you." He looked at her. Something moved through his expression. The unmanaged thing, the thing she'd seen for 1 second on their wedding day. Here again, briefly. 2 weeks, he said. 2 weeks, she confirmed. She went back to the house. She made supper. He came in late, later than usual, and she heard the horse come back from the mountains after 10, and she lay in her room and listened to him come in quietly and go to his room, and she thought, what is out there? What is he carrying? She did not sleep well. The hands were the next layer of information. Not from talking to them, she was careful about that. careful not to ask the hands things that she could read as mining for information about their employer. But from watching them, which she did, the way she'd always watched things comprehensively, without appearing to. They trusted him, not the performed trust of employees who were managed correctly. The actual trust of people who had been given a reason to trust and had accepted the reason. She saw it in small things, in the way they brought him problems, without the specific preemptive apology of people who were afraid of how their employer would receive bad news. In the way the older hands talked to him, which was not the way employees talk to employers, but more the way men talk to each other when they respected each other. And she saw it in one specific thing that happened on a Tuesday morning in the 3rd week. One of the younger hands, a boy of maybe 16, newest on the ranch, still finding his feet, had made a mistake with the cattle count. Not a disaster. A miscount that had caused a half day of unnecessary work to track down what turned out not to be a missing animal. Evelyn was near enough to hear the conversation when Caleb found out. She expected, because this was how most men in authority handled a young employee's mistake, some version of the correction that also established consequence. Some version of you need to be more careful, and next time there's a cost. Caleb said, "Walk me through what happened." The boy walked him through it. Caleb listened to all of it. Then he said, "The counting method you were taught is the problem. It works on smaller herds. On this size you need a different system. Let me show you." He showed him. The boy was not shamed. The mistake was not minimized. It was simply turned into information, into something useful. Evelyn stood near enough to see all of this. She went back to what she'd been doing, and felt the list she had been keeping in her head get longer. The first time she saw Victor Langford's name was in a letter that arrived at the ranch on a Friday. She received the mail she had taken over that function along with the accounts and the household management, and she sorted it, and she saw the return address and the name, and felt the specific alertness of a woman who has been paying attention to a name for 3 weeks and has now encountered it in the physical world. She brought it to Caleb. She watched his face when he saw it. He controlled it immediately. But she was watching specifically, and she saw the thing that crossed his face before the control arrived. It was not fear. It was something more complicated than fear. Something that had the same cold quality, but was more like the expression of a man looking at a problem he has been managing and seeing it remind him that it is still there. "From Langford," she said. "Yes," he said. "Do you want me to leave?" she said. He looked at her. "No," he said. He opened the letter. He read it. His expression held through the reading. The control was back in place, but when he put it down and looked at her, she saw something in his eyes that was more honest than he usually was. "What does he want?" she said. "What he's always wanted," Caleb said. "This ranch." He folded the letter. "He has been attempting to acquire it for 3 years. He believed before our marriage that the terms of my father's will gave him a viable path. And now," she said. "Now he is recalibrating," Caleb said. "This letter is not a legal move. It is—" He paused. "It is the kind of communication that powerful men send when they want you to know they haven't forgotten." "A reminder," she said. "A reminder," he confirmed. She looked at the letter. "Tell me about your father," she said. He was quiet for a long time. She waited. "My father built this ranch through deals that benefited him specifically and hurt other people generally," he said. He was not a dishonest man in the way that dishonest men usually are. He didn't steal. He used the legal structures available to him in ways that were technically within those structures and were genuinely harmful." He looked at the desk. He died believing he had been a successful man. The people who lived with the consequences of his success had a different picture. "And Victor Langford," she said. "Victor Langford benefited from those deals," Caleb said. "He and my father had an arrangement. When my father died, Langford expected to inherit a version of that arrangement." He held her gaze. "I did not continue it." "Which made him an enemy," she said. "Which made him someone who believes I owe him something I am not going to give him," Caleb said. She looked at the letter. And the will clause, she said. The marriage requirement. My father's idea of protecting the ranch's continuity, Caleb said. He put it in because he believed an unmarried man was a vulnerable operation. He named Langford as the trustee because Langford was his partner. He paused. My father did not understand, or chose not to understand, that Langford's interest in the ranch was not about stewardship. He wanted to give Langford a path to control, Evelyn said. He believed he was protecting the ranch, Caleb said. He was wrong. He held her gaze. I spent 3 years finding a wife specifically because I understood that the path existed and I needed to close it. She looked at him. And you chose me, she said. He was quiet. You chose me, she said again. Out of 6 months of looking, there must have been other options. He held her gaze. There were other candidates, he said carefully. What made you write to me specifically? She said. He was quiet for a long time. And then he said, I heard about the Heart Ranch situation, about what you had been doing for 2 years, managing the operation and the family simultaneously after losing both parents. He held her gaze. I heard from 3 different people that you were the person holding everything together and that you were doing it without making a spectacle of it and without asking for anything from anyone. She held his gaze. That's why you wrote, she said. That's part of why, he said. She heard the same thing she'd heard 3 weeks ago, the same hesitation, the same in-time quality to the part he wasn't saying. She did not push. All right, she said. She left him with the letter. She went to start supper and thought about sacrifice and about the specific recognition of a person who does what needs doing without asking for acknowledgement, and she thought he saw something. She wasn't sure yet what he saw, but he saw something. The night she finally followed him was the 4th week. She had not planned to. She had told herself she would honor the 2 weeks and then the next 2 weeks and whatever came after that, and she had meant it. She was not someone who broke agreements she had made. But it was a Thursday night, and Thomas had come in from a late evening with the hands with a troubled expression that he was trying to control and failing at, and she had pulled him aside in the kitchen and said what? Thomas looked at her. I heard something, he said. From one of the older hands. I wasn't supposed to hear it, I think. I was in the barn, and they didn't know I was there. What did you hear? She said. Thomas told her. 2 of the older hands had been talking about Caleb's rides to the mountains, about what was up there, about people who lived up there, about the fact that it had been going on for years and nobody in town knew about it, and there was a reason for that. Then, one of them had said, if Langford ever found out where that money was going, and the other one had said, Caleb knows the risk. And then they had heard something that meant Thomas was there and had stopped. Evelyn stood in the kitchen and listened to Thomas and thought about the accounts, the withdrawals, regular, 3 years, the mountains. She thought about Cord saying things were different when she was here. She thought about his father and the deals that hurt people. She thought about a man who made coffee before dawn and worked beside his hands in the mud and turned a young boy's mistake into a lesson without shame. She thought about what a man like that would do with the weight of what his father had left him. She thought, I think I know. And she went to the barn, and she saddled the horse, and she rode toward the mountains and the light. The cabin was 2 miles up the mountain trail, not hidden exactly, but not visible from below, set back from the path in the way of a building that had been placed where it wouldn't be casually noticed. Light was coming from the windows. She tied the horse and went to the door. She could hear voices inside. Not alarmed voices. Quiet voices. The voices of people in a space that was ordinary to them. She knocked. The voices stopped. Caleb opened the door. He looked at her. She looked at him. Behind him she could see the cabin, and inside the cabin she could see what she had expected to see, and seeing it was different from knowing it was there. Different in the specific way that the real thing is always different from the idea of it. Old people. A family with children. A man with a scarred arm that spoke of an old injury badly managed. A woman who was watching the door with the expression of someone who was accustomed to being afraid of who was on the other side of doors, and had not entirely stopped being afraid. And Caleb in the doorway, with the specific expression of a man whose private thing has been found and who is deciding in real time what to do with that. "I'll explain outside," he said. "No," she said. "Introduce me." He looked at her. "Introduce me," she said, "to the people in the room." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he stepped back from the door. She walked in. He introduced her. Their names were Gideon and his wife Clara and their 3 children. Hale, who had the scarred arm, who had worked on the Whitmore ranch under Caleb's father and had been injured in an accident that the elder Whitmore had not compensated him for. The older couple in the corner, a man named Rufus and his wife Bet, who had lost their small farm in a deal that Caleb's father had structured specifically to acquire their land at a fraction of its worth. Caleb did not explain this while he introduced them. He introduced them simply by name as people, not as cases or situations. The explanation came afterward outside, while the people inside talked quietly in the cabin as they had been talking before Evelyn arrived. She stood outside with her husband in the Montana dark and listened. He told her all of it. The families his father had damaged, the money, the withdrawals from the accounts, the money she had found and not understood. 3 years of it, quietly, without announcement, without anyone in town knowing, because the moment it became public, it became charity, and charity was not what these people needed. What they needed was what had been taken from them, returned as close to whole as it could be returned. "You can't give them back the years," she said. "No," he said. "So what are you giving them?" "The farm is bought back," he said. "Rufus and Bet's farm. I own it. I'll sign it back to them next month when the legal process is complete." He paused. "Hale's injury I paid for the doctor 2 years ago. Belatedly. Significantly belatedly." His voice had something in it on that word. "And the medical costs going forward if there are any." "The family with children," she said. "Gideon and Clara. My father used Gideon's labor for 3 seasons and paid him below the agreed rate," Caleb said. "The wage difference with interest has been paid, and their eldest will have whatever education she wants when the time comes." Evelyn stood in the dark. She thought about the letter from Langford, about what the older hand had said. If Langford ever found out where that money was going. "Langford knows your father damaged these people," she said. "Yes," Caleb said. "If he finds out you've been repairing the damage." She stopped. "He'll use it," Caleb said. "He'll frame it as evidence that I'm admitting my father's culpability. He'll use it in the property dispute he's been building. He'll try to establish that by making these payments, I've acknowledged liability that could be used to unravel the ranch's legal standing." Evelyn held that. "So you've been doing this quietly," she said, "not to hide it from the people you were helping, to protect the ranch from Langford using it against you." "Yes," he said. "You've been carrying both things simultaneously," she said. "The obligation to these families and the legal risk of meeting that obligation." "Yes," he said. She stood in the dark. She thought about sacrifice. About the specific particular kind of sacrifice that nobody sees, because the person making it has arranged it to be invisible. She thought about a man who had told her, "I am tired of people who say what they think I want to hear." She thought about his hands. "Caleb," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at him in the dark, this man she had been married to for 4 weeks, this man she was still learning the shape of. "You were carrying this alone," she said. "Yes," he said. "Before me," she said. "For 3 years alone." "Yes," he said. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because asking for help with something like this requires trusting someone with something that could be used against you," he said. "And I had not—" He stopped. "I had not found anyone I trusted that way." She held his gaze in the dark. "And now," she said. He held her gaze. "I'm telling you now," he said, simply. She looked at the cabin, at the light in the window, at the shadows of people inside who had been damaged by a name that was now her name too, by inheritance and marriage both. "I want to help," she said. He looked at her. "With the legal structure," she said. "I was looking at the accounts. There's a way to structure the payments differently that makes them less legally vulnerable. Less visible to the specific argument Langford would make." She held his gaze. "I can't undo what your father did, but I can help protect what you're doing about it." He looked at her for a long moment. "You've been here 4 weeks, he said. "I know," she said. He stopped. "You just offered to take on someone else's legal risk and financial complexity within 4 weeks of arriving." "Yes," she said. "Why?" he said. She looked at the cabin again, at the light in the window, and the family inside, and the old couple who had lost a farm, and the man with the scarred arm. She looked at her husband, because a man who spends 3 years quietly repairing his father's damage without telling anyone about it, and makes coffee before dawn, and works the fence in the mud with his hands, and made room for my brother on a Tuesday morning without being asked, she said, is a man whose work is worth protecting. Caleb looked at her, the unmanaged expression, fully there this time, not for 1 second for longer, long enough that she could see it clearly and understand what it was. She had been right about his hands. She had been right about which kind of secret it was. "All right," he said finally. "All right," she said. They went back inside. She met the families properly, not as the ranch owner's new wife, but as Evelyn, who had some ideas about accounts, and was going to help with the structure of things. Rufus shook her hand with the handshake of a man who had not been treated as someone worth shaking hands with in a long time, and understood exactly what the gesture meant. Clara looked at her across the cabin with the specific expression of a woman who was deciding whether to trust something that looked trustworthy. Evelyn met her gaze directly and waited. Clara nodded. Small, decisive. Evelyn nodded back. They stayed for an hour. Then she and Caleb rode back down the mountain in the dark together side by side on the trail that was wide enough for 2 horses if you rode close. They were quiet for most of it. About a mile from the ranch, Caleb said, "I should have told you sooner." "You told me when you could?" she said. "The 2 weeks. You needed to be sure," she said. "That I was who you thought I was when you wrote the letter." She held the reins steadily. "I would have done the same." He was quiet. "Were you?" he said. "Who I thought you were." She considered it. "I don't know exactly who you thought I was," she said. "But I think you thought I was someone who would understand the obligation and not run from the risk of it." She looked at the trail ahead. "That part is accurate." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "The rest of the letter," he said. "The part I said was only part of why I wrote to you." She waited. "I told you I heard you were holding everything together without making a spectacle of it," he said. "That was true. But what I didn't say," he paused. "What I didn't say was that I heard it from Cord, who had been to Caldwell for supply and had met Thomas at the feed store. Thomas mentioned his sister in passing, and the way Thomas talked about his sister." He stopped. "What?" she said. "With the same tone I heard in the hands when they talk about Caleb," he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the trail. "Not obligation," he said. The tone of someone talking about a person they would follow anywhere. He paused. "I thought whoever she is, she has earned that from someone who knows her. And a person who earns that kind of loyalty from someone who knows them well is a person worth—" He stopped again. "Worth what?" she said. He looked at her sideways in the dark. "Building something with," he said. She rode beside him in the Montana dark, and felt something she had been carefully not feeling for 4 weeks arrive without asking permission. She didn't name it, but she let it stay. They reached the ranch. He took care of the horses. She went inside. She made coffee because it was late, and they had both been up long, and the morning would come early, and some things needed fuel, regardless of the hour. She set 2 cups on the table. He came in from the barn. He stopped when he saw the 2 cups. He sat down. She sat across from him. They drank coffee at midnight in the kitchen of the Whitmore Ranch, and the mountain was behind them, and the families in the cabin were still there, and Langford's letter was still on the desk, and the challenge that was coming was still coming. But so was the morning, and this was the first night Evelyn had sat across from her husband, and felt like she was sitting across from someone she actually knew. She filed that. She was building a very long list. They had work to do, and for the first of the 4 weeks, that was exactly what they did. Not the kind of work that had defined Evelyn's life at the ranch until now. The accounts, the kitchen, the household management, the mountain rides, but the specific concentrated work of people who have decided to fight for something and are building the tools to fight with. Evelyn started with the structure of the argument. She worked from the legal challenge Langford had filed, which she had read 3 times and had the shape of memorized. His lawyer was clever. The argument was narrow and specific, focused on the spirit rather than the letter of the will's clause, which meant it required a different kind of counter than a simple fact dispute. You couldn't simply prove the marriage had happened. You had to prove it had happened with genuine intent. Genuine intent. She sat with those words for a long time. She thought about a man who had spent 3 years repairing his father's damage alone. She thought about coffee made before dawn. She thought about a fence post in the mud and a young hand's mistake turned into a lesson, and Cord saying he's not his father, and Thomas, with the expression of someone who would follow a person anywhere. She thought about what genuine intent looked like when it wasn't performed. She went to find Caleb. He was with Cord going over the ranch's operational records the other side of the preparation, the documentation of how the ranch had been functioning as a genuine household operation since the marriage. Cord had been keeping records for years quietly, in the specific way of someone who understood that the day might come when records mattered. "I need to talk to Aldridge," she said. Caleb looked at her. "When?" "Today," she said. "Before the week is out." She paused. "And I need to talk to him first. Before you do." He looked at her steadily. "Why?" "Because the case for genuine intent has 2 parts," she said. "Your part and my part. And my part is something I need to tell in my own words, without you in the room, so that it doesn't look coordinated." He was quiet for a moment. "Evelyn," he said. "Yes," she said. "What are you going to tell him?" he said, not controlling, asking. She held his gaze. "The truth," she said. "My version of it." He held her gaze. "All right," he said. She rode to the county seat on Thursday. Aldridge's office had the specific, organized efficiency of a man who handled complicated things and had built systems for handling them. He looked at her when she came in with the particular attention of someone who was revising an assessment in real time. He had met her at the wedding. Briefly, he had formed an impression. She could see him revising it now. She sat down. She told him everything, not the abridged version, not the careful version, the complete version from the 3 in the morning, the night before the meeting, to the kitchen garden, and Cord's 2 sentences, and the mountain, and the cabin, and the families, and what she had found in the accounts, and what she had understood about the man she had agreed to marry for practical reasons, and what she had come to understand about him since. She told him about the coffee. She told him about Thomas and the horse on Tuesday morning. She told him about going up the mountain and walking into the cabin and asking to be introduced. She told him about riding back down and the quiet and what had been said on the trail. Aldridge listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "That's a more complete account than I expected," he said. "I told Caleb I would tell the truth," she said. "The whole of it. My version. Including the part where the marriage began as a financial arrangement," he said. "Yes," she said, "because denying that would be dishonest, and because the honest version is stronger than a cleaned-up version." Aldridge looked at her. "Why?" he said, not testing, genuinely asking. "Because Langford's argument depends on the marriage having been purely financial, and nothing more," she said. "If we deny it was financial at all, we lose credibility, and Langford wins on the credibility point. If we confirm it was financial at the start, and show what it became, we remove the purely from his argument. A marriage that began as an arrangement and became something real is not the same as a marriage that was only ever an arrangement." She held his gaze. The becoming is what he can't account for. Aldridge was quiet again. Then he said, "The family's on the mountain. Caleb's payments." "Yes," she said. "You want to use them in the defense." "I want to tell the truth about them," she said. "Not use them. The distinction matters." She held his gaze. "The families have agreed to have their situations acknowledged, not their names in public documents, without consent, but the pattern of what Caleb has been doing. 3 years of quiet repair. At legal risk to himself. At financial cost. Without acknowledgement." She paused. "That is not the behavior of a man who was manipulated into a marriage." She held his gaze. "The becoming is what he can't account for." Aldridge was quiet again. Then he said, "The family's on the mountain. Caleb's payments." "Yes," she said. "You want to use them in the defense." "I want to tell the truth about them," she said. "Not use them. The distinction matters." She held his gaze. "The families have agreed to have their situations acknowledged, not their names in public documents, without consent, but the pattern of what Caleb has been doing. 3 years of quiet repair. At legal risk to himself. At financial cost. Without acknowledgement." She paused. "That is not the behavior of a man who was manipulated into a marriage. That is the behavior of a man with a specific, complex, deeply considered understanding of what he owes and what he's responsible for. The marriage fits into that pattern. It doesn't stand apart from it." Aldridge looked at her for a long moment. "You've thought about this thoroughly," he said. "I've had 6 weeks to learn who I married," she said, "and 4 days to think about how to defend it." He picked up his pen. "Tell me again," he said. "From the beginning. This time I'll take notes." She told him again. When she left his office, she felt the specific sensation of having done something irreversible, not unpleasant. The feeling of commitment after the point of decision, the weight of having put something into the world that was now out there and couldn't be called back. She was not afraid of it. She was married to a man she had not known 6 weeks ago, and she had just told his lawyer the complete truth about who that man was and why she was choosing him. The choosing was real now. More real than the wedding had been, because the wedding had been an agreement between 2 strangers, and this was a decision made by someone who knew. She rode home. Caleb was in the kitchen when she arrived. He had made coffee. She looked at the 2 cups. She sat down. He sat across from her. "How did it go?" he said. "Well," she said. "What did you tell him?" he said. "Everything," she said. He held her gaze. Including the coffee," she said. He looked at the cups on the table. "The coffee," he said. "I told him that on the 2nd morning of our marriage, I came into the kitchen and found coffee already made," she said. "And that I understood from that single thing more about who you were than I had understood from the meeting or the wedding or anything else." She held his gaze. "I told him it was the most significant piece of evidence I had encountered in 6 weeks, that this was a marriage between 2 people who were actually trying to understand each other." He was very still. "You told my lawyer about the coffee," he said. "I did," she said. He was quiet. "And," he said, "and I think he believed me," she said, "because it's the kind of detail that is too specific and too small to be manufactured." He held her gaze for a long moment. "Evelyn," he said. "Yes," she said. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at the coffee cups. "I should go talk to Aldridge," he said. "Yes," she said. "He's expecting you tomorrow." He went the next morning. He came back in the early afternoon, and she was in the study working, and she looked up when he came in and waited for him to tell her how it went. He sat down across from her. "He asked me one question," Caleb said. "At the end, after everything else." "What question?" she said. "He asked me what changed," Caleb said. "From when I wrote the letter to now. What was different from the arrangement I had planned and the marriage I had." She held his gaze. "What did you say?" He looked at her. "I said I planned for someone who would help manage what I was carrying," he said. "What I found was someone who decided the carrying was worth doing." She held that. That's a significant distinction, she said. Yes, he said. Aldridge seemed to think so. She went back to the accounts. He went back to the ranch. They worked. The second week brought the first real push from Langford's side. Not a legal move too soon for another legal move, something more direct. 2 men from Langford's operation appeared at the ranch gate on a Monday morning and asked to speak to Caleb. Cord came to get him. Evelyn went with him. The men were not threatening. They were the specific kind of not threatening that was itself a form of threat, very controlled, very deliberate, with the quality of people who had been sent to deliver a message and were doing so with careful attention to the exact words. The message was simple. Langford was willing to settle. He would drop the legal challenge. In exchange, Caleb would sell him the South grazing land, 200 acres at a fair price, and the matter would be closed. Caleb listened to the whole thing. He looked at the 2 men. "Tell Victor," he said, "that I'm not selling." The men looked at each other. "Mr. Langford thought you might say that," the taller one said. "He asked us to mention that the matter of the families in the mountain cabin is something he's become aware of recently." Evelyn went very still beside Caleb. Caleb's expression did not change. "Tell him," Caleb said, "that I'm still not selling." The men left. Evelyn and Caleb stood at the gate and watched them go. "He knows," she said. "He knows something," Caleb said. "He doesn't know everything, or he would have been more specific." "How much time does that give us?" she said. "Less than we had yesterday," he said. She looked at the road where Langford's men had gone. "He's going to use it to build the liability argument," she said. "He's going to find a way to put the family payments in front of the court as evidence that you're acknowledging your father's culpability." "Yes," Caleb said. "Which means we need to move first," she said. He looked at her. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true," she said. She held his gaze. "Caleb, if we wait for Langford to define this, we lose. He has more resources and more time and more patience than we do, and he has been planning this for 3 years. She paused. "We have something he doesn't." "What?" he said. "The actual story," she said. "He has a version. We have the truth. But the truth doesn't matter if it's told second." He held her gaze. "What are you proposing?" he said. "Tell the Valley," she said. "Not through Aldridge, not through a legal document. Tell them yourself, directly, before the hearing." "A public," he started. "Not a spectacle," she said. "Something small and direct. The people in this valley who knew your father, who know the families who were affected by his dealings, they need to hear from you. Not from a lawyer, not from a document, from you." He was quiet. "I don't do that," he said. "Public, I don't." "I know," she said. "You are the least publicly expressive person I have ever met." She held his gaze. "Which is exactly why it will be credible when you do it." He looked at her. "You're saying my limitation is the argument," he said. "I'm saying that a man who avoids public expression and then does it anyway to tell an uncomfortable truth is not a man performing. He's a man with something to say." She held his gaze. "Langford is banking on your silence. He has been for years." Caleb looked at the road. He was quiet for a long time. "If I do this," he said, I need to be able to say it my way, not a speech. Not, your way," she said. "I'll be there. Thomas will be there. Cord will be there." He held her gaze. "And you," he said. "What do you say?" "Whatever is true," she said. The meeting happened on a Thursday in the 3rd week. Not a town hall. Nothing announced with fanfare. Caleb sent word to the men he knew, the ranchers in the valley, some of the older families people who had dealt with his father and had been watching what happened with the Whitmore Ranch for years, with the careful attention of people who had a stake in the outcome. They came because he asked. 12 people in the Whitmore main room, which Evelyn had cleared and arranged for the purpose without making it look arranged. Caleb stood at the front of the room. He held his hat. He looked at the people in front of him. He said, "My father did things that hurt people in this valley. I'm not going to qualify that or explain it away. The damage was real, and some of you know it personally because it happened to you or people you knew. The room was quiet. I've spent 3 years trying to address that damage, he said. Quietly, because I believed making it public would help Victor Langford more than it would help the people I was trying to help. He held their gaze. I was wrong about that. Langford found out anyway, and now he's using it. He told them about the families, not all the names the families had been asked, and some had consented to be named, and some had not, and he honored that precisely. But the pattern. 3 years of payments. The farm bought back. The medical costs. The wages corrected. The education promised. He told them about the will, and Langford, and the marriage. He told them about writing the letter to Evelyn. Then he stopped, and he said, I married a woman I did not know because I needed to close a legal path Langford had been planning to use against this ranch. That was the reason I wrote the letter. It was an honest reason, and I told her so. He looked at Evelyn. What I did not tell her, he said, and what I am telling you now, because she has earned the right to hear it in public, is that I chose her specifically. Not because she was available and willing. Because I had heard enough about her to know she was someone who did what was right even when it cost her. Someone who held things together for people who depended on her without making a spectacle of it. He held her gaze. I wrote to her because I thought she would understand what I was trying to do here, and I was right. He looked back at the room. This valley has known my family for a long time, he said. You've known what my father was. I'm asking you to know what I am. Not because I need your good opinion, because Victor Langford is going to try to take this ranch through a legal process that depends on this valley not knowing the truth, and the truth is yours to know. He stopped. He put his hat back on. He sat down beside Evelyn. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Rufus, who had come down from the mountain specifically for this meeting, stood up. He said, I'll tell you what the man did for my family. He told them. Hale stood up after Rufus. He told them. Gideon stood up after Hale. When the third family had spoken, a man named Patterson, one of the valley's established ranchers, someone who had watched the elder Whitmore with the careful distance of a man who knew something was wrong but had not known how to address it, looked at Caleb and said, I heard about the Langford challenge, and I want to say something. He said it. He said that what he had heard that evening was the most complete account of a man's actual character he had ever received, and that he would be willing to say so in a legal proceeding if Caleb's lawyer thought it would help. 5 other people said the same before the evening was over. Evelyn sat beside her husband and listened. Afterward, when the room had cleared, and it was just the 2 of them and Cord doing the final tidying, and Thomas sitting in the corner with the expression of a young man who has just seen something that has changed his understanding of what a person could be. She put her hand over Caleb's on the table. He turned his hand over. He held hers. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. They sat in the quiet of the room where her husband had done the hardest thing he had done in 6 weeks, and probably in several years, and the quiet was the comfortable kind, the earned kind, the kind that only existed between people who had been through something together and had come out the other side, still beside each other. Thomas from the corner said, "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Caleb looked at him. "I had help," he said. Thomas looked at Evelyn. She met his gaze. He nodded once, the specific nod of a younger brother who has just seen his sister be exactly who he always knew she was. She looked back at the table. She thought about a list. She thought about what the list had become. The legal hearing was on a Friday in the 4th week. Aldridge was good. Patterson and 2 others appeared as character witnesses. Rufus provided a written account that was read into the record. The financial documentation reorganized by Evelyn into a structure that was both clear and legally sound told the story of 3 years of payment in language that no lawyer could mischaracterize. Langford's lawyer was skilled, but Langford's argument depended on a premise that the marriage had been purely financial and therefore not genuine, and the premise was no longer holding. The judge asked Evelyn one question directly. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "you have described the origins of this marriage as financial. Can you tell me whether you believe it has become something other than that?" She looked at the judge. She did not look at Caleb. She said, "I married a man I did not know because I needed to save my family's ranch, and he needed to protect his. Those were the terms, and we were both honest about them." She held the judge's gaze. "What I have learned in 6 weeks is that I married a man who has been quietly trying to repair damage he did not cause for 3 years, because he believes that having a name means answering for what the name is on. Who made coffee before dawn on the second morning of our marriage because I had been awake since 3, and he had noticed?" She paused. "I did not know I was marrying that man. I married the arrangement. What I found inside the arrangement was him." The room was very quiet. The judge looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at Langford's lawyer. "The challenge," the judge said, "does not meet the evidentiary standard required to override the terms of a properly executed marriage. The will clause is satisfied." He put the gavel down. "We're finished." Langford stood up. He looked at Caleb. Caleb held his gaze. Langford said nothing. He walked out. His lawyer followed. The room took a breath. Aldridge was at their side in 30 seconds. "That's done," he said. "The ranch is secure." Caleb nodded. He looked at Evelyn. She looked back. They were in a courtroom in Montana in 1878 with an arrangement that had become something else, and a legal challenge that was now resolved, and a man named Langford who had just walked out of a room he had expected to win in. "Done?" Evelyn said. He took her hand, not dramatically, not with any production. He just picked up her hand and held it right there in the courtroom with Aldridge and Thomas and Cord and the people who had come to bear witness all around them. She held it back, and that she thought was that, except it wasn't. Because on the ride home with the day done and the legal challenge resolved and the valley behind them and the ranch ahead of them, Caleb said, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him. "The other part," he said. "The part I said was only part of why I wrote the letter." She had been carrying that since the study. 6 weeks of it. "Tell me," she said. He held the reins. He looked at the road. "I heard about you from Cord," he said, "but I had also heard about the Hart Ranch situation from my own investigation. Not investigation, I had been paying attention. To the families in difficulty in the valley." He paused. "It was how I found people I owed things to. I had a system for knowing who was in trouble." She held his gaze. "And you were in trouble," he said. "The ranch was in trouble. And I had heard what you had been doing to try to save it, and I thought this is a person doing exactly what I would do. Someone trying to hold something together that matters for people who need it held." He looked at her. "I did not write to you because you were available. I wrote to you because when I heard about you, I thought that is someone I would want beside me." She held that. "Before you met me," she said. "Before I met you," he said. "You chose me," she said. "Not from a list of viable candidates. Specifically." "Yes," he said. She looked at the road ahead. She thought about a man who had built a system for knowing who was in trouble in his valley. She thought about what that said about who he was, and had always been underneath the cold and distant stories and the closed face and the rides to the mountain in the dark. She thought about the list she had been building. She thought about what it had become. "Caleb," she said. "Yes?" he said. She looked at him. "I didn't fall in love with the wealthy ranch owner," she said. He held her gaze. "I fell in love with the man you are when nobody is watching," she said. He was very still. "That man," she said, "has been watching out for this valley for 3 years without asking anything in return. Has been making coffee before dawn. Has been making room for people who needed room. Has been answering for a name he didn't earn and building something he did." She held his gaze. "I did not plan to fall in love with you, but I found out who you were, and here we are." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said, "Here we are." She looked at the ranch coming into view ahead of them. "Here we are," she said. He held the reins. She sat beside him. And they rode home together to the ranch that was both of theirs now in every way that mattered, past the arrangement and past the contract and past the handshake and into the specific country of two people who had told each other the truth enough times that the truth had become the foundation of something real. Something neither of them had planned. Something both of them had chosen. Something neither of them had planned. Something both of them had chosen, and the choosing Evelyn was learning was not a single moment, but an accumulation of moments, each one small and specific and real, that added up to something neither of them had a name for yet, but both of them understood. The morning after the hearing, she woke to the smell of coffee. She lay in her room for a moment and let herself feel the specific weight of what had changed. The legal challenge was resolved. The ranch was secure. Langford had walked out of a courtroom without the thing he had been building toward for 3 years. The families on the mountain were protected. The valley knew the truth. And she had said on a road in Montana in the late afternoon light that she had fallen in love with the man her husband was when nobody was watching. She had not planned to say it. She had not planned any of it. She got up. She went to the kitchen. The coffee was there. 2 cups, the same as every morning. She sat down. He came in from the early round. He always did the early round himself, the first check of the ranch before the hands arrived, something she had understood from the second week as the time of day when he was most himself, most quiet, most simply present in the work. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything about the road. They drank their coffee. After a while she said, "What happens now?" He held his cup. "What do you mean?" "With Langford," she said. "He lost the legal challenge. But men like Langford don't finish when they lose one thing." "No," he said. "They find another angle." "What's the next angle?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about that since last night," he said. "The families on the mountain are known now, not publicly, but Langford knows. He knows the pattern and he knows the amounts. He can't use the liability argument to take the ranch. The court rejected that." He paused. "But he can still create problems for the families specifically, depending on what he finds and how he uses it." Evelyn held her coffee cup. "He could go after Rufus directly," she said. "The farm buyback if he challenges the transaction." "Yes," Caleb said. "Or Hale," she said. "If he finds the medical records and tries to establish that the payments were an admission of fault." "Yes," Caleb said. She looked at the table. "We need to finish what we started," she said. "Not just defend against Langford's moves. Finish the actual work. The farm deed in Rufus's name. Hale's medical arrangement properly documented. Gideon's wages corrected in a legally clean way." She held his gaze. "If everything is properly concluded and documented, Langford has nothing to pick at. The arrangements become facts, not vulnerabilities." He held her gaze. "Aldridge," he said. "Aldridge," she confirmed. "This week." He put his cup down. "You were awake last night," he said. She looked at him. "How do you know?" "I was awake too," he said. "I could hear you." She held his gaze. "I was thinking about the road," she said, directly, because she was always direct with him, and she was not going to stop now. He held her gaze. "So was I," he said. She looked at the table. "Caleb," she said. "Yes," he said. "I said something on the road that I meant," she said. "I want to be sure you know that. It wasn't the moment talking. It wasn't the relief of the hearing being over." She met his eyes. "I meant it." He held her gaze. "I know," he said. "Do you?" she said. "Because you haven't said anything about what you mean." He was quiet for the specific length of time she had learned meant he was doing the complete thinking thing rather than deflecting. Then he said, "I told 12 people in our main room that I wrote to you because you were someone I wanted beside me." He held her gaze. "That was not a legal argument. That was the truth." "You said it in the context of defending the marriage," she said. "Yes," he said. "I said it in that context." It's also true outside that context. She looked at him. He looked back. Looked. Neither of them moved toward the other. Neither of them needed to. The kitchen table between them was not a distance. It was simply where they were, both of them, the same place they had been every morning for 6 weeks, and the space between them was full rather than empty. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. She picked up her coffee. He picked up his. They went to Aldridge the next day. The follow-through work was less dramatic than the hearing, but in some ways more important, the specific, careful legal work of making things permanent rather than merely decided. Aldridge was efficient and thorough, and by the end of the week had the farm deed transfer completed, Hale's medical arrangement properly structured, and Gideon's wage correction formalized in a way that was both clear and legally unassailable. He also filed a formal notification with the county that documented the nature of the Whitmore family payments as voluntary reparations, which established their character on the public record in a way that closed the liability argument permanently, not just for the current challenge, but for any future version Langford might attempt. "That's the last opening he had," Aldridge said when it was done. "He'll find another one," Caleb said. "Probably," Aldridge said. "Men like Victor Langford always think there's another opening." He paused. "But he's spent 3 years and significant resources on this particular approach, and it has now failed at every stage. There's a point at which the cost of the next approach exceeds the value of what he's pursuing." He looked at Caleb. "I think he may be reaching that point." Caleb nodded. Evelyn looked at Aldridge. "Can we make it cost more?" she said. Both men looked at her. "The families," she said. "Specifically, if Langford makes any move against Rufus or Hale or Gideon directly, is there a preemptive legal structure we could establish that makes that move expensive for him?" Aldridge thought about it. "Potentially," he said. "A protective arrangement around the transactions. If he interferes with a completed legal transfer, he's not just challenging Caleb, he's challenging a public record. That carries penalties." He picked up his pen. "Let me look at the specific statutes." He found them. By the end of the following week, there was a legal structure in place that made any interference with the family's restored situations significantly more costly than ignoring them. Not impenetrable, nothing was impenetrable, but costly enough to be a genuine deterrent to a man who was already calculating whether the returns justified the investment. Caleb rode to the mountain on a Thursday to tell Rufus. Evelyn came with him. She had been coming to the mountain regularly since the first night she had followed the light up the trail. The visits had changed in character over the weeks, less formal, less structured around the arrangements, more simply the specific ordinary ease of people who had been through something together and were now on the other side of it. Clara made tea when they arrived. She sat across from Evelyn at the small table in the cabin and said, "The hearing went well." "It did," Evelyn said. "Caleb told us?" Clara said. "He came up the day after." She held Evelyn's gaze. "He also told us what you said to the judge." Evelyn looked at her. "He recited it," Clara said. "From memory. All of it." She paused. "I don't think he's the kind of man who memorizes things unless they matter to him." Evelyn looked at the tea in her cup. "No," she said. "He's not." Clara looked at her steadily. "You love him," Clara said. Not a question. Evelyn held her gaze. "Yes," she said. "Does he know?" Clara said. "I told him on the road," Evelyn said. "And," Clara said. "And he told me he chose me specifically," Evelyn said. "Before he met me, because of who he heard I was." Clara was quiet for a moment. "That's a Caleb Whitmore way of saying it," she said. "Yes," Evelyn said. "But you understood it," Clara said. "I'm learning to understand him," Evelyn said. Clara smiled. It was the first full smile Evelyn had seen on her. Not the careful assessment smile from the first night, not the grateful smile from when the arrangements were confirmed. The real one. "Good," Clara said. On the ride back down the mountain, Caleb was quiet for a while. Then he said, Clara said something to me. What? Evelyn said. She said your wife is the right person beside you, he said. She said it the way Clara says things directly, like she's confirming something she's already decided. Evelyn smiled. Clara doesn't waste words, she said. No, he said. She doesn't. He held the reins. I told her I knew. She looked at him sideways. Did she believe you? She said. She said, then say it louder than a courtroom, he said. Evelyn looked at the trail. She means well, she said. She's right, he said. She looked at him. He held the reins and looked at the trail and said, You said you fell in love with the man I am when nobody is watching. He paused. I want to say something back. She waited. He held the reins. When I went through my father's papers after he died, he said, I found a letter he had written and never sent. To my mother. He had written it the year she died, and he had not sent it. And I don't know why. It might have been too late to send. It might have been that he didn't know how. He looked at the trail. The letter said, I have spent my life building things, and I have not known what I was building them for. She was quiet. He meant it as a regret, Caleb said. He had built the ranch and the business and everything else, and at the end, he wrote to a woman who was already dead and said, I don't know what any of it was for. He held the reins. I read that letter when I was 26 years old, and I decided it was not going to be my letter. That's why you started going to the mountain, she said. That's part of why, he said. But the other part, he paused. The other part is that I have been building things for 15 years and wondering the same thing he wondered. What is it for? And then... He stopped. She waited. And then I heard about a woman who had been holding everything together for 2 years alone, he said. And I thought there is someone who knows what things are for. They are for the people who need them to hold. She held that. And I thought, he said, if I could find her and she would come, then maybe I would stop wondering. She looked at him. He looked at her. Did you? She said. Stop wondering, he said. Yes, she said. He held her gaze. The second morning, he said, when you sat down at the table and picked up the coffee and said nothing about the fact that I had made it. You just sat down and picked it up like it was natural, like it had always been there. He paused. I watched you do that, and I thought, yes, that is what it's for. The trail was quiet around them. The Montana morning was cold and clear and enormous and entirely indifferent to the two people riding down it, which was a quality Evelyn had come to love about Montana. It did not care what you were feeling, and somehow that made the feeling more real. Caleb, she said. Yes, she said. That's the most words you have said consecutively in 6 weeks, she said. He looked at her. Something moved through his expression. Clara said, say it louder, he said. She held his gaze. I heard you, she said. The twist came in November. It was 6 weeks after the hearing, and Evelyn had begun to understand the rhythm of the ranch in winter, the way the work contracted and deepened, less visible from the outside, but no less demanding the specific quiet of a cold Montana season that required the same attention as every other season and rewarded it differently. She had also been learning the rhythm of her husband, which was its own study. She knew now that he was most talkative in the evening between supper and the time he went to his room. Not talkative by most people's standards, but by Caleb Whitmore's standards, which meant he would say 3 or 4 substantive things rather than 1 or 2. She knew he kept a copy of his mother's recipe for cornbread in the back of the kitchen drawer, and had never made it and had not told her it was there, and she had found it and not mentioned it waiting for the right time. She knew he checked on Cord first thing in the morning after the early round every single morning in the way of someone performing a habit of care that had become invisible to him through repetition. She was building a different kind of list now, not evidence, just knowing. The November morning she came downstairs to find Thomas at the kitchen table with an expression she recognized from 2 years of watching him try to manage things he didn't know how to manage. She sat down across from him. Tell me, she said. Thomas looked at her. It's not bad, he said. I need to tell you something, and I don't know if it's the right time. Tell me anyway, she said. He told her. Patterson's Ranch, one of the neighboring operations, the man who had stood up at the Valley meeting and offered to testify, had an opening. A foreman position. The man who had been foreman was moving his family north. Patterson had approached Thomas specifically because he had been watching Thomas work the Whitmore operation for 6 weeks and had a specific opinion about what he had seen. Thomas wanted to know what Evelyn thought. Evelyn looked at her brother. She thought about 3 in the morning 2 years ago, and May's nightmare, and the specific particular weight of holding everything together for 2 years and what it had meant to have Thomas beside her doing it. She thought about an 18-year-old boy who had said, "You're going to go about the meeting with Caleb," in the tone of someone who understood something Evelyn was still working out. "What do you want?" she said. Thomas looked at the table. "I want to know if you need me here," he said. "Thomas," she said. He looked at her. "I need you to be the man you're becoming," she said. "That's what I've always needed from you. Whatever that requires." His jaw moved once, the specific jaw of an 18-year-old managing something that mattered. "So I should take it," he said. "What do you think?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I think Patterson's operation is smaller than this one, but it's mine to manage," he said. "I think I could learn things there that I can't learn here, because here I'm always in Caleb's shadow, and the shadow is a good shadow, but it's still someone else's." He paused. "I think I want to build something I can point to and say I did that." She held his gaze. "Then take it," she said. "You're sure?" he said. "Patterson's Ranch is 40 minutes from here," she said. "You'll be at this table for Sunday supper, and I expect you to be." She held his gaze. "But yes, take it." Thomas let out a breath. Caleb came in from the early round. He looked at the two of them and assessed the room the way he always assessed rooms, immediately accurately. "What happened?" he said. Thomas told him. Caleb looked at Thomas for a moment. Then he said, "Patterson is a good man. His operation is sound. The foreman position is a real position. He doesn't use that title lightly." He held Thomas's gaze. "What I said to you that first Tuesday about the horse. You've been doing that kind of work ever since. Watching what needs to be seen, asking the right questions." He paused. "You're ready for that position." Thomas looked at him. "You think so?" he said. "I said it," Caleb said. "That means yes." Thomas looked at Evelyn. She smiled. He accepted the position. He moved to Patterson's the following week, which was the first genuinely difficult thing Evelyn had experienced since the hearing. Not because she worried for him, but because the specific particular way of having Thomas at the breakfast table every morning was something she had not understood she would miss until she was missing it. Caleb noticed. Of course he noticed. He was making coffee on the 3rd morning after Thomas left when he said without turning around, "Sunday he'll be at the table." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "And Nora and May," he said. "Whenever you want them. They should be here more." She looked at her husband. "We haven't talked about whether," she started. "They're your family," he said. He turned around. "This ranch is yours. Therefore, this ranch is theirs. Whenever they want to come." He held her gaze. "That was always the arrangement. I should have said it more explicitly." She held his gaze. "Caleb," she said. "Yes," he said. "When you say this ranch is yours," she said. "What do you mean by that specifically?" He looked at her steadily. "Legally," he said. "As my wife. And," he paused, "and otherwise, in the way that matters more." She held his gaze. He set the coffee on the table. He sat down. She sat across from him. "When I was 3 in the morning the night before the meeting with you," she said, "making my list of reasons to consider it and reasons not to. The bottom of the reasons to column." "Yes," he said. "May is 7, she said. "That's what I wrote. One reason that outweighed the list on the other side." He held her gaze. "I know," he said. I think I understood that the day she asked if she would still have the horses. She looked at him. You heard that, she said. I was near the doorway, he said. I wasn't listening deliberately. I heard it. He paused. And you said yes. Everyone comes. He held her gaze. That was the first time I understood what I had written the letter to. She looked at the table. She thought about May drawing horses. She thought about Caleb near a doorway, not listening deliberately, hearing the sum of who Evelyn Hart was in 4 words. Everyone comes. You knew then, she said. I knew something then, he said. I didn't have a name for it. What's the name for it now? She said. He held her gaze. He said, you know the name. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she said, yes, I do. Nora and May came for Sunday supper that week, and Thomas came from Patterson's, and Cord sat at the far end of the table with the expression of a man who had been waiting for a table like this for a long time, and was not going to make anything of it, but was not going to pretend it was ordinary either. May sat beside Caleb. Evelyn watched this happen. Her 7-year-old sister simply choosing the seat beside her husband, with the instinct of a child who had been reading adults for 2 years and had decided something about this one. Caleb looked at May. May looked back at him. Do you know how to fix a bridle? May said. Yes, he said. Will you show me? She said. After supper, he said. May nodded and went back to eating with the focused satisfaction of a 7-year-old who has obtained what she wanted. Evelyn looked at Cord. Cord was looking at his plate, but the corners of his mouth were doing something she had never seen them do before. The letter from Langford arrived 2 weeks later. Not a legal document. A personal letter. He wrote 4 sentences. You have won this round. The challenge will not be renewed. I trust we can conduct our business in this valley without further interference from either side. I congratulate you on your marriage. The last sentence was the most interesting. Evelyn read it and put it down. Caleb read it. He put it down. He looked at her. He's done, she said. For now, he said. Aldridge said there's a point where the cost exceeds the value, she said. He reached it, Caleb said. She looked at the letter. He congratulates us on our marriage, she said. Yes, Caleb said. That sentence is the most honest thing he's written to you in 3 years, she said. He understands that the marriage was not what he thought it was, that it became the thing he didn't account for. She held his gaze. He's telling you he misjudged. Caleb held her gaze. He did, he said. So did I, she said. When I sat across from you in the study, I thought I was agreeing to an arrangement with a cold and distant man I would manage carefully and keep at a professional distance. And, he said. She met his eyes. And I found out that the cold and distant man makes coffee before dawn and turns young men's mistakes into lessons and fixes things quietly and alone for 3 years because he thinks it's right, and chose me specifically because he heard something about who I was before he had met me. She held his gaze. I misjudged considerably. He held her gaze. So did I, he said. I thought I was writing to someone capable and honest who would help me manage a complicated situation. And, she said. And I found out, he said, that capable and honest was the least of what I found. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the Montana winter was doing what it did, enormous and cold and entirely indifferent and somehow more beautiful for it. Inside the Whitmore ranch, the coffee was warm, and the table was set for 2, and the letter from Langford was on the desk, and the accounts were in order, and the families on the mountain were protected, and Thomas was 40 minutes away, building something he could point to, and May was learning bridal repair from a man she had chosen to sit beside at supper. Evelyn looked at her husband. Her husband looked at her. Caleb, she said. Yes, he said. I have been keeping a list, she said. He tilted his head. What kind of list? Since the first morning, she said. All the things I found out about you. The coffee and the hands and the fence and the young hand's mistake and Cord's 2 sentences and the mountain and the cabin and the courtroom and all of it. She held his gaze. I started it as information. Things I was filing so I could understand the situation. And now, he said. Now it's not information, she said. It's just you. She held his gaze. It's just who you are, and I know who you are. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said, Tell me something from the list. She thought about it. You make coffee before dawn, she said. Every morning, before you check the rounds before anything else, you make it and you leave 2 cups. She paused. For 6 weeks, you have left 2 cups without ever saying anything about it, without making it a thing. Just 2 cups, every morning. He held her gaze. Yes, he said. That, she said, is the whole list. He looked at her. That's all, he said. That's everything, she said. It's the coffee and everything the coffee means. That's the list. He held her gaze. And then Caleb Whitmore, who did not make speeches, who said less and meant more, who had spent 6 years building a ranch as a sentence he thought he deserved, and 3 years quietly repairing his father's damage,